Hello internet, and welcome to another episode of Doggo Yaps. It's a series where I yap, and because I ran out of content, today we'll be yapping about Pridwin's Memory of Chaos tier list right here. With the release of Feixiao, she has exceeded a lot of expectations. There are a lot of speculation that says that Feixiao is just mid when she was released, but upon further inspection and experimenting, I personally think she's one of the greatest characters in the game. And let's see what Pridwin has ranked everyone currently. But I'm also quite burnt out, so I'm trying the more yap style video, so there's probably gonna be less brain rot here. Let me know what you guys think. To start through an overview, we're split to 4 roles as usual. We have Apex characters to start, so let's start from there. These are the characters that Pridwin thinks to be the best in the game currently. To start with, tier 0. At a glance though, I agree with pretty much every single one of them. But let's start with the damage dealers. We got Akron and Feixiao. Akron, well, I'm not even gonna touch her because we all know how good she is. But the bombshell that's being dropped on this is Feixiao though. Now she's ranked as tier 0, same as Akron. Based on my own personal experience, Feixiao's damage per screenshot will never be higher than, Akron's damage per screenshot when you fight like 5 enemies. But what's unique about Feixiao is the amount of time she has a good follow-up attack. Feixiao's follow-up attack does like 30-40k for me, which isn't anything too groundbreaking, well, at least in this day and age, but she is able to pull off 2 follow-up attacks per turn. All of that while being built pretty speedily, so she can take multiple turns and have multiple actions of attacks with her follow-up attack. With every hit dunking like half 100k of damage to the enemy, it actually racks up to be quite a lot, to the point where if you measure the total amount of damage between the 2 characters, Akron versus Feixiao, you won't see too big of a difference. While even the nerdy math stuff aside though, you can see that Feixiao this week against characters that are weak to her element, especially the Kafka boss, she's destroying Kafka easily, and even off element, she can destroy Aventrine as well, which does require you to have good single target damage. And on top of all that, considering the amount of variety you can have with a Feixiao team, she is truly one of the best characters in the game. All you really need is a Robin plus, well, anything you have. You could go with a free March 7th, you could go with, well, the IPC All-Stars in Topaz and Aventrine, or maybe you just have a 4-star Moza in your setup, well, you can use them as well. All of which will perform really well, and all you have to do is to do attacks. The moment you do that, Feixiao's potential will be increased. A very simple and straightforward strong character to me. I full-heartedly agree on the tier 0. And to look at the rest of the tier though, we see Firefly in tier 0 still. I fully agree as well. She's still really strong. If you want to force yourself to use Firefly, even this week when it's not really a break-centric week, you can, and she can still zero cycle anything in my opinion. And for the amplifiers or buffers though, we have, well, the usual Robin and Ruanmei. But what is worth noting is Robin got increased from tier 0.5 to now tier 0, and we can clearly see why. With the release of Feixiao, Robin is now really sought after because, well, she is the one piece of puzzle that makes Feixiao so much better. Not to mention the MOC itself currently is helping out follow-up attacks or just multiple attacks, right? Making Robin's entire action advance buff and follow-up attack gimmick a lot more prominent. Therefore, she is considered the best buffer alongside Ruanmei in this current moment. In the case of Ruanmei though, well, nothing needs to be said. She is still too strong. I'm almost bored of Ruanmei at this point. I've seen Ruanmei way too much, man. We need something else, something funner. Nothing really much to be said here. It's pretty obvious why these 2 are here, and I full-heartedly agree as well. The final role we have here in tier 0 would be the sustains. Aventrine, nothing much needs to be said. Follow-up attacks right now are in trend. Aventrine is the best follow-up attack sustain, so, that's why he's here. What is interesting though is Huohuo here. Now, Huohuo did get an increase by, the green arrow at the side. She went from tier 0.5 to tier 0 currently, and it's clear to see why as well. When we take a look at the bosses this week, we have Kafka and we have the Aventrine boss, both of which has insane CCs that could just ruin your entire turn if you're not cleansed up. As basically the best cleanser in the game, Huohuo's value certainly skyrocketed. Now, it's not only because of the fact that she's good against debuffs, her buffing abilities can help your team do more damage, her energy regenerations as well, all of which does help your team do one thing correctly, which is, well, do more damage, do more ultimate. If you're interested in like speed clears and whatnot, Huohuo is one of the more premier characters for you to speed clear, especially when equipped with Quid Pro Quo, which is a icon that gives you yet more energy. To get a bit more energy for, say, someone like Yunli, which we'll touch on later, really does help you clear your stages quicker, which is why this week, undoubtedly, Huohuo is standing a tier above the rest. And that concludes tier 0. I find it really agreeable. I myself would have ranked it completely the same. To move on with tier 0.5 though, and to start, we do have Dr. Ratio and Yunli. These are the 2 damage dealers, and well, for the case of Dr. Ratio, it's not really that surprising. He is a follow-up attacker, and right now, MOC does help high instances of attack. It's what Dr. Ratio can do. Not to to mention Kafka's boss is weak to Dr. Ratio as well. If you have a Dr. Ratio, he is going to be one of the best options for you. In the case of Yun Li though, this is interesting because she has seen a rise from tier 1. Now there are a couple of clear factors to this. The first factor in my opinion is while the enemy is certainly weak to physical, both of them in fact in MOC 12 are weak to physical, so Yun Li as one of the best crit physical DPS is certainly now higher value. And not to mention she does have the taunt and the CC immunity if you time her ultimate correctly. All of them does help you a bunch in stages like against Kafka with the domination or against Aventrine if you don't get his dice phase out the way. A really straightforward high damage dealer, and in the end, not to mention she has high instances of attack and does have a lot of follow attacks as well, which overall that just means she's benefiting a bunch from the current follow attack meta that we have. Moving on, now let's take a look at the specialist here. We see Boot Hill and we see Topaz. Okay, now in the case of Boot Hill, I actually in my opinion think that we could rank Boot Hill even in tier 0. At least for this week though, when the enemy is like all weak to physical damage, Boot Hill's performance in this current version is insanely good. On the screen right now you see a team with Boot Hill, like even without Ruanmei, all he really needs is a Harmony Trailblazer and he'll be able to decimate anything, especially in this week. Not to mention the boss Aventrine does need you to break him really quickly for you to, well, not get stalled out and take too many turns to clear it. Boot Hill is just the man for the job. With how easy it is to build him and the amount of damage you do for in exchange, his value is incredible this version. And trust me, I know, I tried to do a Boot Hill showcase in the tournament. Long story short, the tournament was terrible for me, so yeah, let's just forget that. But on the screen right now though, you would see what the ideal performance of Boot Hill would have been. And yes, he's doing some insane amount of damage against even the boss Aventrine, which is really annoying to deal with. Moving forward, we do have a Topaz, which did see an increase from tier 1, and now she's tier 0.5, and while it's pretty clear, we are currently in a follow-up attack meta where while the enemies are weak against follow-up attacks, the MOC buff helps follow-up attacks. They just released one of the best follow-up attacks DPS in Feixiao, and rerunning Robin as well alongside with. All in all means, if you have follow-up attacks on your kid, you're probably pretty good. Hence why we see Topaz here. She is one of the best follow-up attack buffers, or rather debuffers, that has a bunch of attacks herself. Pretty essential for a good follow-up attack team. I do agree with this, nothing much to be said. Skipping along, we have amplifiers in Sparkle and Harmony Trailblazer. This one's pretty straightforward in my opinion too. Sparkle, while being good, is definitely not in the level of Ruanmei and Robin, while Harmony Trailblazers may be good, but in the end, they are heavily limited because you have to run Super Break if you run Harmony Trailblazers, and the moment you're not doing Super Break, they are instantly useless, right? So I wouldn't call someone that limiting in tier 0. Personally, I find it agreeable. Let me know what you think. I think some people might argue about this though, but we'll see, right? And lastly, we have the sustain role in Fushred and Gallagher. Now, this is rather interesting because while Fushred was one of the best sustains, and right now she's no longer tier 0, which, well, especially for a week like this where follow-up attacks did get a help in terms of just, you know, character releases, MOC buffs, while the bosses have a lot more CCs, Fushred is still really strong, but not at tier 0, right? So I do agree with her placement in tier 0.5. Her buffs for crits are really good as well, especially right now where we see a lot more crit DPSs in Yun Li and friggin' Feixiao. So Fushred's value, not too bad, but not the best in the game. As for Gallagher, as long as there is a break DPS in the game that's good, Gallagher will always be quite decent. Being able to help out the top tier DPSs like Firefly or Boot Hill does make him one of a kind, at least until Linkcha comes out and completely replaces him though. So yeah, this will be the last time we see Gallagher in tier 0.5 in my opinion. It was a good run though, right? He's been here for a while. And those are the Apex characters in Pritwin's opinion. I found it honestly quite agreeable. Moving downwards though, we see the meta characters. So these are the characters that are great, but not really meta defining, yeah? A general overview though, I'll have to say they've done a really good job in ranking these. But let's just take a look at it deeper though. Tier 1 for the damage dealers, we have starting off Clara, which did get a rise in rank. In my opinion though, this is mainly due to the fact that while the enemy right now are all weak to physical, right? And not to mention again, she is a follow-up attacker. Follow-up attackers usually just get an increase in value this version, so obviously Clara would be here. However, sadly she is not 0.5 because, well, there is Yun Li, which is practically a Clara but a lot more explosive, right? And in my opinion, currently with the Kafka boss and Aventrine bosses, single target nukers are a lot more sought after. So with Clara, she's not the best at single target nuking compared to AoE, so I would say a tier 1 for her is more than fine. Up next though, we do have Dill and Jingli. These two are holding a tier 1 slot for quite quite a long time now, and it's not changing this version either. Now, I personally think compared tier 1 to tier 0, I can never say, you know, Jingliu or Dill can perform the same caliber as Dr. Rachel and Yunli right now. It's simply due to the fact that destruction characters that has multi-targeting doesn't really perform too well at the moment when the bosses have like millions of HP with less mobs spawning around, which in my opinion is a matter of different meta, right? Destruction characters were so good like just a few versions before. Right now it's all about dealing a bunch of nuke damage to a single character. So while the multi-target on both of these characters are great, but it's not the best as just mainly nuking 2 million damage on one singular boss. However, though, they are still more than usable. Avenging boss is weak to Jingliu, while Kafka is weak to Dill. A tier 1 DPS for both of them sounds more than fine. Moving on from the damage dealers, we see the specialist here. These are the meta specialist character, and we actually see something interesting. The end of dot characters. The dot archetype was quite strong a few versions ago, but currently it's all not going well for them. With characters like Black Swan and Kafka dropping from the higher tiers to now tier 1. Don't get me wrong though, they are still quite strong. However, especially in this current week, the dot archetype is simply not shining that brightly. One of the biggest factor, well, of course, are with the boss's immense amount of HP and how the enemy Kafka boss does have lightning rest. It does make it hard for the dot characters to do their job currently. My personal hope is that the dot archetype gets released with a really strong dot buffer, which currently simply doesn't exist yet. When we take a look at the follow-up attackers and the super break archetypes, they all have their dedicated AoE buffer in someone like Robin or Ruanmei. However, someone like that simply doesn't exist for the dot teams yet, which is why although currently dot teams are not that strong, I'm willing to bet in the future that the moment they release another crazy buffer for dot teams, they will definitely see an uprise. So yeah, keep an eye out for the dot characters, guys. They might not be the strongest currently, but in the future, they just have to release one character that ties the whole team together, and you see them again as one of the top characters in the game. Currently though, tier 1 sounds right for them, as they are still usable, just not that great. In the same tier, we do also see March 7th and Moza as well. Now this is interesting because, well, firstly, March is E3 currently, which eventually you get E6. I actually think at E6 you can match like Topaz in value even in tier 0.5. But if it's just E3, tier 1 seems fine for March 7th. She's incredibly strong where she has versatility in terms of her elements and breaking the weaknesses of the enemies. She does a bunch of action advances and a lot of instances of attack, which does make her really good even for a character like Feixiao that needs you to attack a lot. Not to mention she is skill point friendly, incredibly friendly in fact, and she does give various buff through her E, plus she herself can do quite a significant amount of damage. Truly one of the best free-to-play characters in the game. Tier 1 seems fair for her. Moving on, we do have the new character in Moza. Now Moza is calculated at E6, which I bet most people don't have an E6 Moza yet, considering he just came out. It's hard for me to gauge how strong he would be, but from what I've tested though, Moza's value is rather high in like a follow-up attack setup or a Feixiao team especially, but he's certainly no replacement for someone like Topaz, so having him at tier 1 seems right in my opinion. And those are the specialists. We now move to the amplifiers. Here we see Diaoqiu and Tingyun ranked by Pritwin, right? Now we'll start with Diaoqiu though. He's a recent debuffer and he's never really like insanely high tier at all, but hey, tier 1 is not too shabby for sure, and the main use case for him will be as the ultimate pairing with Acheron. Now that team is still definitely incredibly strong, but outside of being in an Acheron team though, Diaoqiu's use case does decrease by a bunch. Considering this week there are no fire weakness, and in the meantime there are even ice weakness too, so you would probably see more Pella users than Diaoqiu. And for all that reason, for Diaoqiu to be tier 1 seems right to me. For the case of Tingyun though, she's still tier 1. A Dance Tingyun is just really helpful in terms of getting that 3-star clear in MOCs, and with characters like Yunli coming along that really wants that energy up, Tingyun's value actually is quite high. Not to the rate of tier 0.5 though, in my opinion. Tier 1 seems right to me. Finally, we do have the sustain in Luocha, and the main thing that he truly lacks would be a form of buffing your team, similar to how Huohuo can do, right? However though, being skill point friendly and being able to cleanse debuff well does net him a slot in tier 1 here. I find it pretty agreeable, nothing much to complain, and that is the end of tier 1. Moving down to tier, here we see the damage dealer in Sela being tier 1.5. There are no rise or decrease in her rank apparently, so yeah. Unfortunately right now, Sela's position is just not that strong. But when we see the Kafka boss, there are no mobs for Sela to farm like extra turns on. And it's been a while since Seele is considered the strongest character in the game anyway. Unfortunately, this is a result of, well, better characters being released. Now, there are a good amount of hunt characters that are dominating the top levels right now. We got Feixiao, of course, and we have like other hunt characters like Topaz is really good. Dr. Ratio is pretty good, but for Seele though, her kit would feel a bit more lackluster compared to the rest, especially when a game with the enemies and the buffs, all of which does not really help Seele right now. But make no mistake though, Seele can still be used, it's just not gonna be that easy. Overall, I do agree tier 1.5 seems right for it. Taking a look at the rest of this tier, we see, well, let's just start with the sustain because it's simple. Well, we got Lynx. Right now, there's a bunch of CCs. Lynx has somewhat of a cleanse. While being able to heal decently does net her a tier 1.5 slot, which I suppose is agreeable. It's just crazy to see a 4-star is here above like some standard 5-star we see below. But before we move there though, let's move back here to the amplifiers of tier 1.5. We see Bronya, Pella, and Silver Wolf. Now for this week specifically, I'll actually prefer that Pella is in tier 1 just for like the adventuring stage, right? Adventuring is a boss where you really want to break fast or just kill outright as fast as you can. Otherwise, it's just gonna take turns after turns. Pella is one of the best icebreakers as well, considering the amount of times you can like just wreck her out on you. Pair her with someone like Boot Hill, you'll have a really easy time in breaking the adventuring boss, and that is why I would personally rank her at tier 0, which if we don't talk about weakness, Pella against the first stage though, Kafka, is not that good, where, well, there's no ice weakness obviously. Having her in tiers 1.5 is not too ridiculous at all as well. In the case of the rest though, we see Bronya and Silver Wolf. The only issue with her really is how she's skill point unfriendly. Putting her in tier 1.5 is okay, but again though, I'll have to emphasize that these are still great characters. For example, using Bronya with Boot Hill again, you get a bunch more turns for Boot Hill, a lot more damage for your team. But when we consider a lot of other DPS we have though, Bronya's action advance while being skill point unfriendly is rather hard to handle. Hence why I would say it's fine for her to be in this tier. And with the case of Silver Wolf here, I personally think this is okay. I don't think she is good enough to be in tier 1. The use case that she has is certainly still with Dr. Ratio as one of the decent pairings with Dr. Ratio, but it's not like you necessarily need her for sure for that team to work. And not to mention there are still RNG for when to plant the right weakness on, say, someone like the adventuring boss. With all that considered, I would say tier 1.5 for her is okay. And that is for tier 1.5. Moving along, we do have tier 2 here. Now with tier 2 though, these are the characters that are still considered decent, but probably you won't see them around too much. And an overview though, I would say it's pretty agreeable. We start with someone like Blade. At least in this version, he is certainly a lot less prominent now with the lack of damage, and considering again there are a lot of CCs which Blade is weak against. With the case of Jingyuan though, he actually dropped down a bit because, well, right now the boss has lightning rest, while you really would prefer more single target damage for the adventuring boss anyway. So Jingyuan being in tier 2 is more than reasonable. For the case of Himiko here, I would actually put her in niche characters. Maybe I'm missing something, but there's no way Himiko is even at all usable for at least MOC 12 right now. They have no fire weakness currently unless you do like some weird Firefly shenanigan with Himiko. For someone like her to thrive though, she needs that fire weakness, right? And then we do have Ting Xue, skill point unfriendly. She is RNG based as well. And add on to the fact that the current MOC is more single target damage oriented, where the bosses has like 2 million health. QQ will certainly struggle a bit, but you can actually still use any of these characters, right? Will you be able to like have an easy time though? I doubt that, but hey, if you give them the best setup, the best relics you have, they can still get the job done. So as much as you would say power creep is real, I have seen worse, right? That's all I can say. I have seen worse power creep where characters just straight up does not get used after 1 month. Moving along with tier 2, we see the E6 duo here. We got Luca, the forgotten guy, and we have Shuei. I will straight up say I have not tried Luca in this week, but considering both bosses are physical weak, maybe Luca could low-key be good. But I suppose even then, for a 4-star that's pretty old now, with his kid being less prominent, even if he's usable with the correct weakness, I don't think he's gonna rise up at all. He would be in tier 2, which is fair enough. And for the case of Shuei, I'm not 100% certain if currently she could be higher, but I definitely know that she is not unusable. She can ignore the weakness of the enemies, and as long as you break the bosses in this version, you have a chance at clearing the stage no problem. And Shuei is someone that relies on breaking the enemy like that, so I would say tier 2 makes sense. Moving along with the amplifiers, we do see Asta and Great Ivan. I personally don't have much to say about these two. They're certainly usable, I guess, but definitely not that great. You can never say no to Asta's speed buff, and you can never say no to more damage by Great Knifed. And finally, with the sustain in Japard, considering the one problem with Japard would be the lack of cleansing debuffs or immunity to debuffs. Like when we look below, we see Bailu. If Bailu is considered niche now without the CC immunities, I think Japard wouldn't be in tier 2 either. But I would say if we consider this version's boss though with Aventurine, using Japard as a way to say freeze Aventurine sometimes is actually a tech that people have tried. It's a bit RNG, but it is one of the ways that you can really destroy Aventurine. If you can land the freeze on Aventurine, you could technically just never get into the die phase, keep him frozen, break him as fast as you can, and just have an easier win. Unfortunately, Bailu can't do that, so yeah. Tier 2 for Japard, I would say, is, yeah, I wouldn't be too bad at this ranking. And those are the meta characters, and now we have the niche ones though. Honestly, there's not much to touch on with these characters now. They're basically just not that great in the current version of MOC. I would say though, with the case of Misha, perhaps he can still be used against Aventurine. He does have a lot of single target damage, but I don't have mine built, so I'm not entirely sure. But I personally do think he could be ranked a bit higher than this. Yeah, for the rest of the characters though, I would say it's pretty agreeable. The ones to take note of is Bailu dropping from tier 2 and is now tier 3. And yeah, this is bound to happen when the bosses are filled with CCs, right? Bailu simply doesn't do well against them. Now, if you really take a look though, you would see characters like Argenti or Jade here as well. I'm sure you understand for sure. They're both just designed for pure fiction, so definitely not MOC right now, which is single target centric. It's not saying they're bad though, but this is an MOC tier list after all, so there we go. Those two are ranked here. And yeah, otherwise it's pretty agreeable. I think all these rankings are, you know, exactly what I would think they would be. Which brings us down to the forgotten ones. Oh boy. My boy Don Hangman, you're here now? Dude, he used to be a guy that I bring in tournaments with. Well, unfortunately, these are the 4 stars or 5 stars in Yanqing that simply isn't up to the par. I'm sure if you look at all of them, you realize, yeah, they have their own issues. Arlen's not a character. Hook simply doesn't deal enough damage to really be considered. Herda in MOC for sure is just not great, but again though, she is great in pure fiction. Dan Heng, there are no win weakness. He's also just not doing enough damage anymore. And then with Yanqing, which even against an ice weak boss, he does have his own RNG. And not to mention, if he's attacked at all and loses his passive buff, he's just so much worse. Even with the best shielders like Japard or Aventurine, sometimes you get unlucky enough, man. Yanqing might just get dumped on enough damage and he just loses his buff. And just by that happening, your DPS is cut in half. And I would say, yep, it's pretty agreeable. They are not really up to par currently. Except for Herda, which is clearly designed for MOC. I do hope everyone else gets some love. My power creep is never fun in my opinion. I used to be so happy because I got a freaking gold shine and I see Yanqing and I'm like, you know what? I can still use him. It's not that bad. But that was like a full year ago. So yeah, I'm hoping to see like something happen with all characters. Same with some characters in the niche category as well, like say Serval. I just can't ever imagine myself pulling out a Serval to use right now, but only time will tell what's gonna happen with the meta though. In my opinion, it's more realistic to expect, you know, better characters for different archetypes like dot buffers, or in fact, based on the fact that there are new sets in the game that's position based or summonable creature based, maybe there's gonna be characters who are released that helps summon characters, right? Like we got Jinyo with the Lightning Lord. Overall, I think this is a pretty agreeable list. Let me know what you think. And yeah, there's probably not gonna be too much edit in this video. I'm hoping to just talk to you guys more, because while there's only so much I can do in the game, and yeah, I'm not too motivated currently, but hey, I hope you found this informative as a discussion though, and that is all. Hope you guys enjoyed, and take care.